All right, what's up, you guys? Yes, 2 days ago on Friday, I requested another 10K from the same accounts. Here's the emails if you want to look at them. It's slightly under 10K. I requested around 1990 in each account. I could have made it so I requested exactly 2000, but I was like, nah, let me just lock this in. I'm not even going to play around. So, yeah. More stats. Here's the stats for the month. Not the best stats. It's been a very slow month. Last week or the week before the last week, I lost around 664 in each account, and I easily made it back in one winning day. That's what you want to see. But the best stats, the stats that I really wanted to show, and the stats that I think are the most impressive is this right here. I have the old dashboard from TOPSTEP. I really want the new ones, so I don't know if, I'm going to keep going with these accounts because if you don't know, if you request 5 payouts on the same accounts, then you're most likely going to get moved over to a live account. I'm currently on the third payouts on these accounts. As you can see down here, these have been the two past payouts. The third one isn't here because it hasn't processed yet. It's the weekend. Um, but yeah, I've traded these accounts 37 days, almost 20 green days. So it's been pretty good. The P&L curve, you can see there's not a crazy winning day, there's not a crazy losing day. It's been just a very consistent, boring couple of months. And I hate to say it, but boring trading almost always gives you the best consistent results. I usually talk about, psychology in my payout videos. I kind of got tired of that because I feel like I'm repeating a bunch of the same things. So in today's video, I'm going to go over my A plus setup. I take this trade almost every single day. I promise you, it's like copy and pasting it. Some days I lose, some days I break even, some days I win. Um, this isn't the best strategy in the world. It's pretty simple. If you've heard of it, it's called the orb, but I also mix it in with supply and demand, and I'm going to be talking about that more. Um, I'm not going to be breaking down like 1,000% my strategy. I want to do that in another video and just go over more detail of the strategy. This is just going to be like an overview, about it and just the thinking that goes into it. And I'm specifically going to go over Friday's trade, which I made a pretty good amount. It says I took 2 trades, but that's really because I scaled in, as you can see here. Um, yeah, it was a total of 20 micros, which I've never done before in these accounts. It was the first time that I scaled in this heavy, but I'm gonna explain why I scaled in that heavy. Okay, anyways. Um, Also, some people might see my charts and just be like, whoa, that's a messy chart. I don't think it's that messy. I've gotten that comment a couple of times. I understand why it might look messy, but it's really just lines and zones. It's not like, I have 100 indicators or anything. But anyways, I'm gonna try to explain my thinking behind my traits, my thinking behind my A plus setup. Okay, right? So this is the market. Let's just say that's so bad. Okay, let's say this is the market, you know, right at 9:30 when the market is about to open. I usually try to mark a zone, a supply and demand zone, above price and a zone below price. What time frame do I get these zones from? I look on every single time frame basically. I look on the 4 hour, 3 hour, 2 hour, 1 hour, all the way down to the 15 minute. If there is a 4 hour zone, let's say this is a 4 hour zone down here, and there is a 30-minute zone inside of it, like this, I focus more on the bigger time frame zone. So in this case, it would have been the 4 hour, and I would delete the 30-minute. So if you're kind of confused about that, bigger time frame zone is always going to be better than a smaller time frame zone. That's what I've focused on, and that is what has made me the most money, is by focusing on the bigger time frames. But anyways, so markets opened up every single day. I'm like, okay, once I have my zones, I'm like, okay, boom, I'm thinking longs above this 50% line and shorts below this 50% line. Lonnie, what's your 50% line? It's this rectangle tool. You go to the settings, style, and it's this middle line right here. The thinking behind this is, whoops, let me delete this up here. The thinking behind my zones is, and I'm not the first person to do this, a couple of people do this, is okay, let's say this is a demand zone. Normally, you would expect price to tap into this demand zone and for buyers to pop up, and you would normally take a long. This definitely works. The way that I trade it is, if price approaches this demand zone and it gets below this 50% line here, we're more than likely going to continue to go down that direction. So that's the move that I try to catch every day, is this right here. So it's funny because I'm a supply and demand trader, but I don't trade it the regular way. I trade it kind of the opposite way. I trade supply and demand breakouts basically, which is kind of weird because it just doesn't make sense, but it works. And if you're wondering, Lonnie, well, why do you not trade it, kind of how you're supposed to, like this? And the main reason I don't buy at demand zones is because I can't catch a consistent entry that way. I can't have a specific confirmation to when to go long. When do I go long? Do I go long after price taps, in this area and then it gets out the zone? Then I can get an entry for longs. You could definitely do that. But what I've found for me to, what am I saying? What I've found best for me is easy, is a candle closing below 50%. And then once that candle closes, okay, let's just say this is a candle right here. Once this candle closes below 50%, then I wait for this wick here to break down. And then that's when I would take the short. And then I would put my stop loss above 50% or above the zone, depending on the trade. Okay, and then it's the same thing for longs, vice versa. So that's the supply and demand, right? That's kind of the main part. But sometimes I don't have a zone, so I have to depend on something else. That something else for me is going to be called the orb, the opening range breakout. If you don't know what that is, basically you wait for the first 15-minute candles of New York open. Okay, let's say, this is the first candle of 9:30, 15 minutes. Then you mark the high and the low of that 15-minute candle, and you wait for a 5-minute candle to close outside of the range. Then once that 5-minute candle closes outside of the range, then you take the long or the short, breaking out of that opening range. So as you can tell, if you can't tell by now, I'm a breakout trader. That's why I thrive in volatile markets and I don't do as good in slower markets. So recently, these past 2 months, it's been very slow. And even though I've been doing beautiful, you can tell it's kind of been like a very slow month. Boom. What was it? June was a very slow month. I still got a payout, which was great, but it was very slow. And then May I would say, was a pretty good trending month, and you can see my P&L was a bit better. But, anyways, yes, I'm a breakout trader. Okay, back to the original concept. Boom. Once I have a zone above and below price, and keep in mind, like, these zones here are going to be different every single day. They're going to be a different time frame every single day, but I make sure that these zones are the bigger time frame ones. Okay, the biggest time frame possible. Okay, boom. I always wait for the first 15-minute candle. Normally, that 15-minute candle, a couple things might happen during that first 15 minutes. Sometimes, which has been happening a lot recently, the first 15-minute candle usually opens up like this. It opens up and it stays within this range here, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Another thing that happens in the first 15 minutes is it breaks out. Perfect. That's kind of what I want to see, is the breakout right there. Boom. And then what I try to get is the continuation of it. And then of course it can happen to the downside as well. But anyways, let's just say this was the first 15-minute candle here. Then I would mark the highs and the low, the opening range. I always mark it yellow. Okay, then I would wait for a 5-minute candle outside of the opening range, which I promise you almost 90% of the time, 99% of the time, the breakout of the opening range aligns with my 50% line. And it happened on Friday's trade, which I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to go over it and you're going to see what I'm talking about. But almost always, the order breakout aligns with my 50% line. So in this case here, I would wait for a 5-minute candle close, something like this. That's a horrible candle. But it's outside of the zone and it's above this 50% line. So from there, once that wick breaks, then it's hinting to me, okay, it's definitely going to continue to go up. And then that's when I would take the long in this example. I would take the long. Lonnie, what do you target for your take profit? I focus on the stop loss first. So for this example, my stop loss could be below this 50% line, right above here. Because from that point, it's like, okay, I'm in longs. And if price ends up going below this 50% line, then it's most likely just going to go back in the range, right? So that could be your first stop loss, which is normally it's a pretty tight stop loss, but it does work. But usually I try to go for the safer route and I put my stop loss outside of the zone. So I give it a little more room to breathe. Then from there, once I have my stop loss, I have two options. I could aim for the next area of interest, which is usually going to be another supplier demand zone. That's one thing that you could target. You could target some sort of daily liquidity, daily low, daily high, whatever, London low, Asian low, whatever it is, it could be a target. So those are potential targets, right? But for me, I usually just target a 1 to 2, and sometimes I do aim for the next zone, which could give me a really good risk reward ratio. But with slow markets recently, I have just been aiming for a 1 to 2. I get my money and I'm out. I'm done for the day. If you trade live with me in the Discord, my first one of the day, I'm done for the day. Then I show up the next day and that's it. Okay, but anyways, so that's the concept, right? It's really just a opening range breakout, and I use supply and demand breakouts for confirmation. If I don't have any zones, which right now price is at all-time highs, it's been kind of tougher to get supply and demand zones because it's been like chopping up at all-time highs. If I don't have any zones close to price, then I just depend on the opening range breakout, which, bro, opening range breakout is just, honestly, I think it's changed my trading for the better because it's been a confluence, it's been a confirmation, and it's so clean. The only issue with trading this opening range breakout strategy is you can't thrive, you can't really succeed with a slow choppy market, because sometimes what happens is the market opens up and then it kind of just does this, and I can't trade that. So as you can tell, like last week I didn't trade Monday and Tuesday because it was slow and the market really wasn't breaking out. That's like the only bad thing about trading this orb strategy and just being a breakout trader in general. You really got to slow down when the markets are slow. You can't chase profits and you can't force trades. But that's just me. Okay. So let's go over Friday's trade, which was this right here. Okay, and I know this seems like, whoa, that's messy. It's really not. So let's delete all of this. I started from the 4-hour time frame, right? And again, we're at all-time highs. There's really not much zones. The only 4-hour time frame I could have marked was this one right here. And you're probably looking at it and you're like, well, that's really ran through, If you ran through it, it's probably not going to work out. For me, what I do is if a zone has been broken through already, for example, this one was broken through already, I look to see if price wants to tap into it and then reject it, right? It's like resistance right here turning into support. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. Okay, so for Friday, I ended up marking this zone. Usually, I don't try to mark it like that, but I had to because there's no other zones. Okay, I go down to the 3-hour, no zones. 2-hour, again, no zones. 1 hour, if you zoom in, and again, it's not the best zone, but there was really not much I could do. So I ended up marking this 1-hour zone here. And you're probably like, well, why did she mark that 1-hour zone? It really doesn't look like much. Number one, I marked the zone because there is no other zones. Number two is these reactions here, price reacting to this area here and price rejecting 50%, made me confident in the zone. It made me confident that this is actually an area of interest, right? So boom, I ended up marking up this zone. And then now I'm trying to remember the trade. Let's see. Okay. And then you're probably looking at this and you're like, okay, we're at all-time highs. Price is bullish. We're at this support area. We're bouncing from this area. I'm bullish. I try to make my trading to a point where I don't have to predict it. I just have to read it. So into it, every day, I'm like, I give myself two ideas for a long or a short. I don't try to be like very strong on my bias because then your ego might get in the way. So every day I'm like, if price gets here, then I'm taking short. If it gets there, then I'm taking long. So from there, it's just like I'm just waiting for price to do his thing and I'm just going with the flow. Okay. So market opened up. Also, jeez, if you saw my chart before, you saw the white lines. I really wasn't gonna talk about my white lines because it's not like I use them, religiously for entries and exits and whatever. I kind of just have my white lines sitting there as a way for me to know, okay, price possibly might reject this area. And the way I mark my white lines is like this. I use this magnet tool here. Oh, you can't see it. The magnet tool on the left, it can help you mark out your zones, but I draw my support and resistance lines white. That's why I have a couple. And then if you zoom in here, you can see how I draw them. I draw them at the bodies, not the wicks. And it's just, from there, it's pretty simple. For right now, I'm not going to mark it just because I don't want it to get in the way. Some people don't like the white lines. And, in today's case, it really wasn't like I depended on it. Okay, but market opened up. I mark out the highs and the lows of the first 15-minute candle yellow. Why do I do it yellow? I just like to color code my zones and my areas just so I know whatever I'm looking at. Okay. Boom. This was the 9:30 candle. Then I go down to the 5-minute and I'm waiting for the 5-minute candle confirmation close, right? So boom. 10 a.m. candle, news came out. I waited and it ended up closing below my 50% line as well as the opening range. So this is the opening range breakout right here. That's another confluence. And like I said earlier in the video, most of the time my supply and demand breakout aligns with the opening range breakout. Okay, so from there, I wait for price to continue. And I'm like, boom. Okay, if price continues to go down, if it breaks this wick here, then I'm taking a short. So boom, I took a short. Once that wick here broke, I almost was in drawdown. I almost got stopped out, but my stop loss was actually right above this zone here. Right above the zone. It was like this. And then next candle popped up. If you zoom in here, you can see that price ended up coming back and retesting this 50% area, and then it dropped like crazy. And then once I saw it retesting this 50% area here and then coming back down, I decided to add to it. And then since I added to it and I was in 20 micros or 2 contracts, I was in pretty heavy. I tightened up my stop loss to 50 ticks, which made sense because not only was it above this wick, but it was also around that 50% area. So the thinking is, yes, it's a tight stop loss, but it makes sense since if price ends up going up here, it's above 50%, so I don't want to be in the longs anymore. So yes, it was a tight stop loss, but it made sense. That's why I scaled in. Also, before I scaled in, I measured it to see, can I actually scale in this heavy? Yes, so I did. And then my 122 was around here. Like I said, it's been a pretty choppy week. I could have aimed for the next zone, which was that 4-hour zone I was talking about. I could have, because it did hit. But since this market has been just not the best, especially last week is pretty tough. I wanted to lock in a payout on vacation. I locked in $1,000. So boom, next candle shot down. I closed it around here because I made 1,105 accounts. And I'm really glad I did, because if I didn't do that, I most likely would have gotten stopped out break even up here. I'm not sure, most likely would have gotten stopped out break even there. But yeah, this TP ended up hitting the zone. And then if you look at price for the rest of the day, you can see it was kind of just ranging in between these zones. And you can also see that it bounced off from this 50% area almost perfectly. So, yeah, that's it for my strategy. It's really not that confusing. I'm really just a little breakout trader that trades in a boring way, and this boring way of trading has made me, I mean, I think it's almost 30K in 30 days. Either way, like, I've made 30K from these accounts, and they're pretty old accounts. They're from May. So, very thankful. Honestly, it was a dream come true being able to request a payout on vacation. I ended up requesting the payout on my way to a dinner on my phone, and I don't know, I felt like a spy or something. I don't know. I can't explain the feeling, but I pray that you guys could feel that feeling too. And if you don't quit, if you keep trying, you definitely will feel that feeling. But anyways, that's it. If you want to live trade with me or get on a call with me, the link is below. I love you guys and thank you for watching.